All right, bang, bang. Today is Tuesday. It is February 22nd. Welcome to the Dog Walk presented by Barstool Sports. Here with Chief. As always, Chief, how are you?
I'm doing great. How are you doing?
Doing well. Is there anything to address with the last episode? Sorry, I should have said that before we went on.
The Canadian truckers one?
Yeah.
I don't think so. I did a over 2 hour Spaces chat afterwards, like the day it came out, I think, and just with all Canadians, and we had thousands of people in there. I think the number got up as total people that listened was over 5,000, and it was really good, really constructive. Like, learned a lot from them. It was good to hear from people, kind of on the ground. But it's a polarizing topic. I try to, people are going to get mad sometimes, talk about different things, but I try to tell the truth as best as I can, and be honest about the way that I look at things, and let the chips kind of fall where they may. And we also got caught in kind of a weird spot with that one where a lot changed, I would say, in that 24-hour period from when we recorded to when it was released. Mm-hmm. So there was a lot of updates, and we missed some things, and but yeah, I feel I'm comfortable with it and with the response. But
yeah, it's a shame you can't rip those
Spaces. They give you the option to record now.
Do they?
And so but I think all it does is allow somebody who missed it to go back, and I know you can replay it on a desktop, but not necessarily your phone. I think I think you can download it, but it takes a week. So I've been doing them for Blackhawks games and post games report, and I want to put it into a podcast. But it would have to basically go out right away in order for it to be relevant on that subject matter. This one, I suppose we could rerun, but it was a 2 hour chat. So I don't know how many people would be interested in going back and listening to that now, especially because it feels like it has kind of resolved itself. Mm-hmm. Feels like that. I could be wrong, but it seems like, we saw the videos.
It's also, we're recording a little early this week because I'm going to Daytona 500
so
this weekend.
It's Thursday. We're recording Thursday the 17th. So I feel like,
a lot will change by then.
A lot could change, but I've seen, videos of the protesters kind of leaving some areas and hugging with the police officers. So it ended in large part, so far without any substantial violence, which is what everybody wants.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, we will talk about something different today. We are getting into
the crack epidemic. Yeah.
Crack. Before we do though, Chief, I do want to talk about, your pet. I want to see how George is doing.
George is doing good, and I have to thank for that.
Who?
Fuzzy.
Fuzzy?
Yeah.
What particularly? What's the website?
You tell me the website.
yourfuzzy.com/dog.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so look, it's one of those things where it's a telemedicine for your pet. Sometimes it's middle of the night. Sometimes, it's you don't necessarily want to, because vet visits can be very expensive.
Yeah.
So, and I've brought George in sometimes where it's I think he's limping, and it's better take him in, because I've had bad experiences with a dog's limping, and then 3 weeks later I had to put Riley down. So I'm very sensitive about that. You bring him in, you pick him up an hour later, the limp is gone, and they're like, yeah, I don't know, maybe he just tweaked something or had something on his paw, and they're like, well, that'll be $400. Mm-hmm. So it's this way you can get some real solid, great veterinary advice about your pet through yourfuzzy.com that saves you the trip and potentially saves you a lot of money as well.
Yep, it's a telehealth service for pet parents that offers 24/7 access to personalized pet care from veterinarian professionals. It's big and small, urgent every day. It doesn't matter. They're there for you for 24 hours, 7 days a week. And they will also recommend the exact right products for your pet, which is nice too. They're handpicked by their established team of veterinarian professionals, and they're available at discounts exclusive to Fuzzy members. And the good thing, like we just said, there's nothing too big or small. Just give them a quick Fuzzy call. That's their line, which I like. That's a good line. So, any little thing about diet, about middle of the night needs, figuring out what makes their breath smell, Fuzzy's there. So right now, Fuzzy is offering our listeners a free 7-day trial membership. Go to yourfuzzy.com/dog today to sign up. That's a free 7-day trial at yourfuzzy.com/dog. And for a limited time, Fuzzy is also offering a special discount of $20 off any of your pet's product needs. pet meds, supplements, food, and more with promo code DOG. That's yourfuzzy.com/dog for your free trial of Fuzzy with access to 24/7 personalized pet care and vet-recommended products. All right, Chief. This is also a topic, too, where we've referenced a million times.
Yeah.
And, we just never covered it at length. So I'm interested to get into this one.
Yeah, so this is specifically about the crack epidemic in the 80s and kind of whether or not or to what degree the CIA was involved, because that is the theory that has been levied against them, and we kind of have come to a place where at least some of the truth. And this story, you think about crack and you think in the movies, it's in streets of Chicago, LA, Miami, this and that. It's almost like that was the line from Ice Cube back in the day. You know the one I'm talking about?
I do, but
I'm paraphrasing, but it's like, he said something like, well, cocaine comes from Colombia and AKs come from Russia, and I don't have a passport, so explain how they got here. Okay. So, and that's like, that's a pretty interesting line. And the story of crack, specifically crack in the 1980s, you can actually trace back to Nicaragua and what was going on with their political situation dating back to 1979. So Nicaragua had been a dictatorship through most of their history. And then there was a socialist revolution in the late 70s, and they took power in 79, this group of people called the Sandinistas. And they were, they were socialists. They were sort of backed and supported by the Soviet Union. And so this was like a pure Cold War situation. So Reagan gets to be president. He gives this speech being like, if we let the Sandinistas just run things and take over, well, then that is a giant feather in the cap, huge victory, foreign policy victory for the Soviet Union. And now they'll be able to feel like they have a free hand in Central America, our backyard. Similar to I think we've talked about the Cuban Missile Crisis. And definitely have talked about different Kennedy things referencing the Cold War and that kind of strategic geopolitical battle where it's like you're not going to fight head on with Russia, but you might fight in, the Russians might go to Afghanistan and we might go to Vietnam, and, they're coming, to Cuba and Nicaragua, but it's really, you have all these little proxy wars, so you don't have to have a nuclear war against each other, but you're still kind of battling for hearts and minds and territory and land and resources all over the world without doing it directly. So that's what was going on. So in response to the Sandinistas, Reagan and the CIA started funding a right-wing paramilitary militia group called the Contras. And they were funding the Contras openly, here's weapons, here's funding, you go out and fight the Sandinistas, don't let the Soviets win in Central America. That was the plan. And then in 82, basically there was a Democratic Congress, and they held a vote, and were like, we're not allowing the CIA to fund the Contras any longer. So all that funding from the U.S. government that was kind of above board, on the table, everybody knew what was up, disappeared basically overnight. Well, that didn't stop the Contras from wanting power, and it certainly didn't stop the CIA from wanting to help fund the Contras and help win that war, just because the government said, hey, we're not doing this anymore. The CIA, and we've seen this in many different topics over the dog walk over the years, they kind of play by their own rules. So what you also saw at that period of time was an absolute explosion of cocaine. Anybody who's seen, what's the Johnny Depp movie?
Blow.
God, how could I not remember that?
Blow.
Just they kind of explain it. It was like, hey, in the late 70s, and George Young, the character, says, Johnny Depp says, we invented the marketplace for cocaine in the late 70s. No one had ever really had it. He was doing marijuana. He switched to cocaine. The profit, he was, working with Escobar. Profits, you're fucking exploding, right? And then in like the early 80s, late 70s, early 80s, they come up with a smokable cocaine, crack. And that's like, you see the glass pipes and all that. And that became like a huge thing. And people were making more money on crack. Because I guess like, and I could have this a little bit wrong, but what I read was that it's processed a little bit differently. So it's like more immediate, okay? But it doesn't necessarily last as long. It goes right into your lungs. It's more addictive. You get like a crazier high, but it's actually kind of cheaper to produce because it's cut in a certain way. Why are you smiling?
Yeah, just because the drug people are like so stern. I'm like, no, this is how they, you know what I mean? Like, so I just know.
Hand up, not a crack guy. Okay, so I try.
So I just like laugh to you, being like, I could be getting this.
Yeah, all those people volunteering, come forward and tell me how crack is used and made, please. And but so you had all crack. Same thing going back to that Ice Cube line. Well, how does it get here? Well, it gets here kind of through organized crime. That's typically who are the big suppliers. All that. Another movie, The Godfather. They have the big meeting, and they have, we're like, we want to bring in drugs. We got this guy, he's got the fields in Turkey, and then their Godfather 1, they say, hey, we're not doing that. We're not bringing drugs in here. And then you see a guy at the table being like, hey, well, there's a lot of, all the meeting of the 5 families. Well, there's a lot of money in this. Well, can we come to a compromise? And I don't want it near schools. And he's like, we only want it in the black population. That's what the guy in the movie said in The Godfather. And that's really kind of where crack was. It was a drug used mostly in urban areas by black and brown people, and it was perhaps intentional. There hasn't been documented proof that shows maliciousness by the CIA in regards to like, let's give it to black people, but that's where it ended up, and we'll kind of get to some of the things that was like, that's fucked up, okay? Mm-hmm. So the CIA has had links to organized crime like forever. Okay. We've talked about that with Kennedy and, the Kennedy assassination. It's like, who's really a CIA agent, who's not. They don't really work for the CIA, but they're protected by the CIA. There's all sorts of things all throughout history, bad guys being used by the CIA, being protected by the CIA. And that's really where this is. So there was a story that was worked on by these 2 reporters in the mid-'80s that said that how the crack was actually getting to the streets, and cocaine too, but a lot of crack, was these Nicaraguan rebels. Okay, that these Contras, who were backed by the CIA, were actually the ones who were the big-time dealers. And the CIA, there was documentation that these reporters uncovered that that the CIA knew that they were doing it, and basically just kind of turned a blind eye to it. Like, you guys need the money. We need to defeat the Sandinistas and the Russians. So, whatever. Just, you guys go do what you have to do to get that money, because we can't give it to you out of the taxpayer dollar anymore. So if you have to sell drugs, you guys are allowed to go do that. And that was basically the story. Okay. So this big thing comes out in the 80s. They write these 2 guys write this story, and the 2 reporters quickly kind of get fired. Okay. So, and the CIA initially like denies, and like, this is bullshit. Like, we wouldn't do that, blah, blah, blah. And the story goes away. Okay. It goes away for about 10 years. So now you fast forward to 1996, and there's another reporter, this guy his last name was Webb, from the San Jose Mercury News, which is the big paper in San Jose. He starts writing about the story, but from kind of like a different angle. He wanted to talk about like the drug scene in LA at that time. And he got connected with this guy named Freeway Rick Ross.
Wow.
Great nickname. Okay. They speculate, and he speculates, Freeway Rick Ross, that he was the first ever crack millionaire. So he was like the crack guy in LA in the 80s, making crazy, crazy money. He did an interview one time where they're like, what's the most you've ever made in a day? Guess the number. I'll just tell you. You won't be able to get. I don't think you'll get.
Well, if you say he was the first millionaire,
I mean, $3 million in a day.
Wow.
One time. Okay, and that's 1980, whatever. I don't know what that would be in today's money, but I'm guessing, it's upwards of 10 million. Okay, so that's how much he made in a single day, and so he went to jail. He got busted, and so during the trial, like, they're asking him, like, you are the guy. You're the kingpin guy. Well, it's like, who is your biggest supplier? And it's like, it turns out his biggest supplier is the guy who flipped on him to the cops, which is this guy named Danilo Blandón, who was a Nicaraguan exile. Okay, so Danilo Blandón, again, with the Contras, but not like the highest level guy. But Danilo Blandón reported to so Blandón was kind of like the middleman, the guy who was making, he was running the drugs up to, like we said, he was the biggest supplier for Freeway Rick Ross. And then he would take that money and somehow get it into banks in Miami and funnel it and clean it, money laundering, and then get it from Miami. And then they would be able to do wire transfers from banks in Miami down to the Contras in Nicaragua. And that was kind of the plan. Drugs come up from Nicaragua to Danilo Blandón. Blandón takes them to Freeway Rick Ross. Rick Ross cuts him off his money profit. That guy takes the money, brings it back to Miami, whoosh, banks, back to Nicaragua. They buy more guns, bullets, food, etc., what they need to do their militia rebellion. Okay. Blandón worked for a guy named Norwin Menezes. And Norwin Menezes was a very high up guy with the Contras in Nicaragua, and was very blatant about how he made money, which was dealing drugs. And he just did it freely, and he would buy them, weapons, and just give these Contras cash. He's in all the, like, he's a very high ranking member of the Contras, in the fight against the Sandinistas. He's heavily protected by like armed people around him, but he's living free. And his nickname was El Rey de Drogas, the king of drugs. Okay. Which is this is a nickname podcast for bad boys. We got Freeway Rick Ross and
I just looked. Freeway Rick Ross is still alive.
Yeah.
If we could somehow get him on this week,
that would be unbelievable. Yeah. So should we get our talent team to reach out to Freeway Rick Ross?
Dial a line.
Yeah, I would love to talk to that guy. And he's done interviews. Yeah, he's a lawsuit against the rapper Rick Ross. He's a book. He's won awards. Yeah, so he's done all sorts of different things, and and he's I think he was originally given life in prison, but he got out in 2009, I think. So, but like you find pictures of Freeway Rick Ross all over the place. He looks like a guy you would trust to like do your taxes or be your lawyer. Like he's very buttoned up sharp, and clean, and like great looking suit. Like it's like this guy, like no wonder he was a millionaire. Like he knew what he was doing. He's a great businessman, just in the wrong field, I guess.
Hey, let's take a quick break here because we got to talk about Roman. If you're sitting out there and you're maybe you're just counting off whatever it is, you're counting gumdrops. It's there's Valentine's Day was last weekend, right, Chief? Maybe you're counting your the candy hearts that you received, and you're saying off the names.
Be mine.
Yes, to last longer in bed. That's not going to work. It's not going to work. So stop doing it. Grab some Roman, because Roman is an online men's health company, and they're changing the game with Roman swipes because it's the secret to longing, lasting sex. Mm-hmm. Longing, lasting sex.
Longer lasting sex.
Longer last. Thank you. Roman swipes are a clinically proven way to last longer in bed. They're effective, easy to use, and they're fast acting, but they don't require a prescription. Roman can ship swipes to you in discreet, unmarked packaging, and each swipe packet is small enough to hide in your wallet for whenever you need it. Super easy to use. Take the swipe out, swipe it on, let it dry. You're good to go. That's it. Go to GetRoman.com/dogwalk to get your first month of swipes for just $5 when you choose a monthly plan. That's GetRoman.com/dogwalk. Go do it, folks. It's that easy. Go get some Roman. All right, let's hop back into the episode.
But anyway, so that guy Menezes, the guy who's the drug lord, El Rey de Drogas in Nicaragua, because he was Contra, okay, like a high-ranking Contra guy, and really helped funding their efforts, CIA protected him. Okay, so you have all these different agencies in the United States government, right? Well, they don't really work together, or at least they didn't. I think they tried to change some of that after 9/11, where the FBI had their information, the CIA had their information, but they weren't talking to each other. Mm-hmm. So supposedly, like the 9/11 cracks, 9/11 sort of slipped through the cracks, and if they had been working together, they would have been able to build a stronger case against some of the hijackers and arrest them before 9/11, supposedly. But anyways, so the DEA they were always after Meneses because it was like, you know, if you're in the DEA, it's like there's Pablo Escobar and then, you know, there's other people. And one of those other people who was like known by everybody was this guy Meneses. And they could not build a case against this guy. They get going, it gets shut down. They get going. So there was one witness statement, a former DEA agent said that they had over 40 indictments over a period of however many years against Meneses that never went anywhere because, you know, they would do a drug raid in a place. I think the one I read about was they do a drug raid in San Francisco in '83, and it was like this guy Meneses is all over all these documents, okay, that they recovered, and like, you know, they have a notebook of supply chain shit, and they got all of it. CIA had the files from that raid sealed, and not allowed to be pursued under matters because it was under the matter of national security. Okay, that was '83. So they were protecting this guy Meneses, where all this drug money and all the drugs rather started, and they're protecting him from arrest and capture from another United States agency, government agency, the DEA. So it's like the CIA is actively working against the DEA, which is a fucking wild thing to think about. Where it's like, we know this is a bad guy. We know this guy is at the root of this horrible crack epidemic going along all over the inner cities and cocaine all over the country. And we know he's the guy. Can we get him? No. It's national security. It's like, that's fucked up. Okay, so 1996, like I said, that guy Webb, he gets this story published about this Meneses to Freeway Rick Ross. He publishes it, and it's like the first viral news story in America ever, because it's 1996. It was like it was a 3-part series of this investigation, which linked the CIA, linked, you know, Freeway Rick Ross, Meneses, the whole thing. It was like put it all together in 3 pieces. It was the first big news story like that was released on newspapers and the internet. Okay, so that was like that story. It wasn't just limited to people that were in San Jose, or maybe it got picked up by the Associated Press and kind of went everywhere slowly. It became a viral story, and it was everywhere. So they're debating it on the Hall of Congress. You know, they like Maxine Waters. She's a congresswoman from California. She was like banging the drum about like, what the fuck is this? To the point that the director of the CIA had to give like had to address it like publicly. And he's like, I will look into this. These are horrendous, you know, allegations that we're going to get to the bottom of this. And everyone's like, well, dude, like, we don't fucking trust you. Like, you're going to investigate yourself? Yeah, I'm sure we'll see what you find. Okay. Mm-hmm. And so the response to that story, and this is just, I feel like it's like a tale as old as time. So you have this kind of not independent, but a smaller time guy breaks this story, and the way that they released it was like, we're the first ones, but this story is deeper, so we hope that this story gets picked up and investigated by all these different places. The opposite happened. All the New York Times, cable news, all the big media outlets did the opposite. This guy's full of shit. Webb is, you know, he's lying about this, he's lying about that. And they crucified this guy to the point that the San Jose Mercury News let him go, and he could never find work again. Killed himself in 2004.
Holy fuck.
So 8 years later, just, you know, couldn't get work, whatever. So this journalist who broke this story ended up having to kill himself because, not having to kill himself, I shouldn't say that, but ended up being like so depressed and out of work, and like, you know, his reputation disparaged. He couldn't work, couldn't do anything, and tragically kills himself. Back up to 1998. The story, basically not because of the media, but because of the people that were so outraged about this, wouldn't let it go. The CIA quietly releases a statement being like, yeah, we knew. Like, everything in that story that guy Webb wrote is basically true. Didn't undo the damage of his reputation, or, you know, for his personal reputation to his career, but it's basically like, yeah, like we,
should have though.
Should have. But it was like, you know, I wonder if, it's still early internet, so I wonder if it was one of those things, but he could have, I think it seems like he just got blacklisted, so yeah, you were right, but fuck you. Like, you can't work for the New York Times or any other papers like that, cause you're out. Okay. So that's a tragic story. And then, like I said, they sealed those docs about Meneses, and then it's like, you get forward about like why, the African-American community gets so fired up, and rightfully so, about crack cocaine, is because in 1994, Clinton and it's a Biden-sponsored bill, and it's been in the news a lot. They had the crime bill, right? And they talk about these things called, and it's led, that bill, that law led to like an insane amount of incarcerations. I think they said 125,000 new prison cells, and they're trying to remove and put an end to violent crime that had really become a major problem throughout the 80s and the early 90s. But one of the things in there, okay, and this is where it gets like, holy shit, like that is, at least to me, objectively racist. 5 grams of crack. 5 grams. I don't know what that looks like, but sounds like not that much. If you get caught with 5 grams of crack, there was a minimum mandatory sentence of 5 years in jail. You'd have to get caught with 500 grams of cocaine, like powdered cocaine, to get the same sentence.
Wow.
So 100 to 1 to get the same sentence. And it's like, well, why was that? Because black people were using crack and white people were using cocaine. Like, that's basically it. And they use this different language in that bill to be like, well, this is where the violent crimes were, this and that. But that is what it is. That's really what they get people, and rightfully so, get so mad about, are these different sentences and different standards for basically the same core product, that in order for you to do jail time, you just have to have crack on you, where you have to have so much cocaine that you're aiming to distribute of the white stuff, of the powder, as opposed to the rocks. So it's crazy. So that is like the story. So, I mean, we could do a full podcast on that 94 crime bill, mandatory minimums, all that. But it's all these different things are kind of tied together that really damaged those communities that were caught up in there was a crack epidemic. And we talked about, that opioid addiction. Okay. Very similar, where it came from. One was like a prescription, but it was, they skirted different government things. And this is the same thing. Like the government, like, hey, well, we're turning a blind eye because it's to our benefit, and fuck anybody who gets hurt. And that's kind of the way it played out. And so you had, so many people just, families broken apart, people, addicted, their lives ruined, journalist kills himself. It's like a horrible, horrible thing. All so they could fund a counter militia paramilitary group in Nicaragua. Seems super like, where are your priorities? Priorities should be here with, your own citizens, and not doing damage to them. But that's not the way they
almost
operate.
have shades of the funding some of these radicalists and the war in the Middle East, right? I mean,
what do you mean?
Wasn't that like a thing? Like people were funding ISIS and whatnot for
well, that's people say that may be how ISIS got their start originally. Because
I don't know the full story.
I'd have to look more into that too, but yes. I definitely remember that being like, well, how was ISIS even born? Well, they were a rebel group fighting against Assad in Syria in whatever year that was, 2012 or 13 or something like that. And, we had to, so we start funding them and supplying them, supplying different groups, trying to spur on this civil war to take out Assad, because Assad was with Putin, and that was, the battle. And it's like, well, yeah. And then what do you know? They get too powerful, and it's like, holy shit. Like they go back and, now they have all the means to go after, places in Iraq that we had just been fighting for 8-9 years, trying to stabilize. ISIS comes in, runs that over. And yeah, like it's just like, It's a quote I've been saying a lot lately on different shows, but it's like, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. Assad, bad guy. Let's get him out of there. Oh, fuck. We just created 100,000 bad guys or whatever, the peak of ISIS was. We created bigger problems by trying to do things in a shady way. And it's like, there's another one that we could talk about too, where it's like, it never gets any attention, but this war down in Yemen between Saudi Arabia and Yemen, where Obama is on the record being like, we have to go, we're going to support them in that war, basically to placate the Saudis because they didn't like how he handled, some other things in the region. So it's like, yeah, we know what you're doing is fucked up, but whatever. So we should probably do an episode on that because that is still ongoing and does not get any attention, the Houthi rebels there. And I don't know enough about it, but I know Obama made that statement.
But you do it on that bill too, like you said. We should also do one on the RICO Act. That's like one of those things.
Explain that.
Like the mob one, like you always see in like mob movies.
Yeah.
Like, that's when RICO went through. When you got to hold the top guys accountable or whatever.
Right.
I've always been kind of fascinated by that.
Curious about
whole
that
thing. So, damn, yeah, that's a wild story.
Crazy story.
Yeah, I didn't see that one coming. I thought it was
some stupid civil war in some far off place and ended up ruining thousands of American lives. It's terrible.
Yeah, brutal.
Yeah.
And then we're gonna try to get Freeway Rick Ross on.
That would be unbelievable.
We're trying to get him on this week.
I feel like that's attainable.
It is. I just looked at his Twitter. He's got a Twitter. He's got a YouTube page. I feel like we could do this. So we'll reach out.
Okay.
But all right then, Chief. Thank you. Thank you everybody for listening. That's it for today. We'll be back tomorrow. We will see you then.